I often wonder if these secret organizations, like the WEF, these kinds of people, and all these weirdos that are in charge of the world, all weird. They're all weirdos. Well, you wouldn't have a pint with them down the pub. You wouldn't go for a coffee with them at your lunch break. You know, that kind of thing. And yet there's something fundamentally wrong with them. I often wonder if they're somehow taking orders from a non-human intelligence at times, because especially now, especially since 2020, they seem to have a loathing for the ordinary human being. I want to know where that comes from. You know, it's more than just snobbery and elitism. It's almost like they're a different species at this point, or see themselves that way.
All the people in power the world over are dedicated to hatred. They're dedicated to destroying community, putting people in a box, controlling them through all kinds of fictitious narratives and false science. And was there some kind of alien life form that infiltrated the human species at some point? It's that cold-bloodedness that we're seeing in society. This just literally, like, you can wipe out, I don't know, 3,000 people in an event. You know, got to be careful what I say here, but think of the events of the last 20 years, folks. You probably know the one that I'm referring to. Or you can send them all off to war. Is this cold-bloodedness, or is this just people that live so much in their ego and that they're almost sociopathic?
Every single indigenous culture, and in Europe as well, don't assume that this is native people around the world, believe in another form of consciousness, another beings that exist outside the perception of humanity, right? I'll talk about the Irish thing, the fairies, right? People from outside of Ireland think that when Irish people mention the fairies or fairy culture, they're talking about Tinkerbell and things like that. Within Irish folk tradition among the country people, not so much now, but like my grandmother's generation, right? They lived in absolute terror of the fairies. They were called the Sidhe, S-I-D-H-E, spelled in Irish. These were a malevolent beings, and if you saw one, you did everything to stay away from them. They kidnapped babies, they messed with people's lives, they were malicious, they were malevolent. They had a pathological hatred of humans. You get this all through folk traditions all over the world. The Wetiko and it's sort of the Native American tradition. It always seems to blend in with two things. One, they have the jinn in the Islamic world. They have a dislike and almost like a vicious jealousy of humans. However, they have the ability in the Native American thing, Wetiko, or in the changeling and the Celtic fairy tradition, to infect the human, possession. And these humans who are affected by this complementary consciousness that exists in another dimension start acting out the desires of the other side in this world. So about 10 years ago, I was at it was kind of a spiritually new age thing in Dublin I was going to, and I just wanted to see what it's like. And I met in the bar this guy who was an African shaman, an Inotech guy. He's just big, huge, hello, my friend, like this lovable African teddy bear, I'd call him, in his big bright coloured shirt. And he was knocking back pints of Guinness and stuff like that. And he says, so tell me, my friend, what are you into? Tell me. And he like Eddie Murphy in Trading Places. And I said, I'm fascinated by psychopaths and psychopathology. And he goes, oh, yes, that's the demon world trying to invade this world. And you know what? That's one of the wisest things I ever heard in my life. And I think he was right. I think that these monsters you see on the TV, these billionaire, quote unquote, philanthropists, have an element of non-human consciousness within inside them. And this is, you can be a Christian, a Muslim, a Jew, an atheist even. This can be even rationalized in atheism if you think of consciousness as an unlocalized field. That and you bring in things like, the quantum world and entanglement and things like this, that we're dealing with people who are not us. They're infected or something. And they see us as a pest on this planet. and we have to be dealt with accordingly. And that's exactly the mentality of some. There's a video of Bill Gates and his former lady going on about the you know what, and he goes, and the next one will be even worse. And he looks at her and she looks at him, and they're like two kids who are planning to do a practical joke on people going,
The data, you don't actually have to give up your personal data. That's not a fair way of describing it. Some societies really chose to make that work.
Yeah, you sit back and you go, if that was me or you, we'd be sectioned. Hillary Clinton, after she found that Gaddafi had been murdered.
As we came, we saw, he died. Did it have anything to do with your visit? No, I'm sure it did.
In the most horrific way, went live on television and was literally in a state of sadomasochistic sexual psychosis, screaming. We came, we saw, he died. If that was you or me or your mate or someone there in the pub who behaved like that in public, they'd be in the psych ward that evening. And not us. This did not explain when I got older and ended up living in New York and working in Wall Street and most of the investment, nearly all investment banks, how there were people there who were very cold-blooded, sadistic, and could tell jokes and laugh about doing business in Central America that would destroy people's lives. And these all came from privileged. Now, first of all, I want to say, most of the people I dealt with on Wall Street are wonderful human beings. They're just ordinary people trying to make a living for their families, right? But the types are out there too. How they came from well-off, comfortable, well-to-do backgrounds. They never suffered a day in their lives. And yet they were full of the same shit that the lads in Ballymun, where I grew up, were full. They're driven by the same pathologies, right? And they had no reason to be. And there was a sadism. There was a strong sadism element there. I stumbled across the work of Dr. Robert Hare in British Columbia, who studied psychopaths, mostly criminals, but not exclusively, and some other work of other authors out there and studies, and discovered that there's an actual, while there's a thing called what I call a proto-psychopath, which is what happened to you when you went at your worst points, right? But that doesn't mean you're one of them. It just means that it happened. Something happened. The trauma caused that, right? The meth and whatever. Then there's ones who are born naturally like that. And if you put them under an fMRI scan, their brains are actually different. They actually have very little activity in the frontal cortex. And the synapses are firing to a much lesser degree. Now, in your frontal cortex is where you process dreams, feelings of affection, feelings of compassion, this kind of thing, and and so on for other people, and understanding it's a part of the brain that has this understanding, that you can't be selfish, right? It's literally switched off in them. It's not broken. It's all there. It's not damaged. It's switched off, and they exclusively exist in the reptilian cortex at the back of the brain. Now, this is so interesting on so many levels. The studies were done that they wanted to know why, there's a very famous video of Ted Bundy, and there's a few of them actually, the serial killer, when he's getting away with stuff and he thinks he has the court because he was in court, he wanted to be seen, they all have this like grandiosity thing, that he thought when he was getting away, his eyes would go like this. When the psychopath is going in for the kill, the eyes widen, the wide, like a reptile, right? Now, what they discovered in one research was that at the back of the brain is the reptilian cortex, but it's also where the optical cortex nerves come back around and they're processed in the spinal cord at this point, the lower brainstem. And it floods with a chemical, a neurochemical called a norepinephrine. And the norepinephrine floods when they're in a state of fight or flight, floods in a psychopath in an enormous level all around the lower brainstem, and it excites the optical cortex, and hence why their eyes go like that. And you can watch the Ted Bundy videos and see it in real time. And it's like, it answers, that's why I wrote that book, because it answered so many questions for me about people I encountered in my life in both situations. how someone was a complete piece of shit when they were younger and then grew up to be a wonderful, loving, successful person. And also these ones who were just monsters, predators all their lives. The sort of Patrick Bateman in American Psycho. And I said, this knowledge is, and actually ironically happened from me reading books about serial killers while I was working in Wall Street, and I was going, this kind of thing, profiles. And this information was too good not to share with the world, because it helped me tremendously. Being bullied at school, these people have bullied me at school and things like that, or things like that. And it made me realize, and then fellas who bullied me at school years later coming over, put their arms around me, said, how are you doing? I'm like, why is he nice now? And I realized he was messed up from his childhood. And so that's where puzzling people came from. I just said, this is too good for people not to know, And he was invited to this Thelema group in Hollywood, and they had a thing called the Gnostic Mass. And it's basically a mass that they do, and it just blew his mind. He used to write to Crowley in England saying, my beloved father, and things like this. And there was a genuine affection there. Crowley was getting on at this point. She was the first person in the United States, I believe, to make an official report of seeing a UFO in the desert.
I mean, you couldn't get a Rizzler paper in between these blocks.